My name is Danielle Strachman. I'm a founder, an educator, a philanthropist, and an investor. I am a co-founder and general partner of 1517 Fund, and we're not your typical venture fund, and I'm not your typical type of investor. I sort of liken myself to a cross between Oprah and Mary Poppins. However, for people who are dropouts. All of the young people you see up here decided to take 2 years off, and instead of going for a university degree, decided through the Thiel Fellowship, which Bodana talked a little bit about yesterday, to work on a project of their choosing. So I funded hundreds of young people, and I've worked with thousands of young people. So I want you all to think for a second, go back, or if you're young enough, go forward, to when you're 17 years old, 17 or 18. Think about how you were spending your time. So I'm going to point out one young man up here, Ritesh, who's on the bottom middle. He's from India, and we met him in 2012 during the Thiel Fellowship's finalist round. He wanted to make Airbnb for India, so he applied to the Thiel Fellowship with that project. So some really amazing things have happened for him. What started out as Airbnb for India, when Ritesh was 17 and 18 years old, he was staying in different people's places, he was doing reviews, he was taking pictures, and he found that it wasn't working out quite the same way as in the US. So what he started to do was work on hotel chains instead and do reviews there. And today, OYO Rooms, his company, is India's largest hospitality chain. They have over 8,000 hotels in 230 cities. They employ 10,000 people. They've created jobs for 160,000 others who work at OYO franchises. So, yes, extraordinary. Ritesh is just 24 years old. And just last month, he announced his $1 billion raise at a $5 billion valuation. Now, in Silicon Valley, we talk about the unicorn, which is a company that's valued at $1 billion. So I was looking up the other day, what do you call a group of unicorns, since he's at the $5 billion range? Interesting enough, you call a group of unicorns a blessing. Ritesh is clearly a blessing to many people and to his country. Let's look at someone else I've worked with. Many of you probably are very familiar with Ethereum. This is Vitalik Buterin. I met him in about 2013. At the time, he was working on an edtech project. We had rejected him from the Thiel Fellowship at that time. For us, it was a little bit too much pandering to the choir about education. Knowing what we know now about Vitalik, he probably would have been extraordinary at revolutionizing education, and we should have backed him then. But what we did is we waited a little bit. And we saw that he was starting to work in crypto, and he was a co-founder of Bitcoin Magazine. He started working on Ethereum, which is a blockchain platform in cryptocurrency. And today, the market cap for Ethereum is in the tens of billions, and he's changing lives all over the world. These young people have done more in the time that it would take most to get through their gen eds in college. So I've been working in education for the past 15 years, and my goal every time I work with students is to think about how do I provide choice for them in their education. So this has looked different ways over time. In 2003, I started an educational consulting company called Heightened Learning. Through a random series of events, before Craigslist was creepy, I used to post ads on there for my tutoring business, and I got homeschoolers starting to write to me. I had never worked with homeschoolers. I was not homeschooled myself, but I fell in love with the families that I worked with. They really changed my view on education. Let me give you a quick example of what it was like to walk into a homeschooler's house. Oh, Danielle, you're here, great. Can you stay? Can we do math and science and some history? And can you help me with this essay? Can you stay for 3 hours instead of 1 hour? They were so happy. When I walked into a student's house who was being publicly or even privately educated, those students were there for homework help and to get through things that they really didn't enjoy doing. They were happy that I was there to help them with it, but it felt a lot like, I don't know, like the adage, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound comes to mind. There were larger problems that even those private school students were having where they weren't enjoying their education. So as I worked with homeschoolers, I had the fortunate chance to meet a woman named Christine Kuglin. She is a homeschool mom, and her and I worked in a homeschool co-op together. Oh, somehow my slides went. Oh, no, here we are. Nope, this is right, sorry. We worked in a homeschool co-op together that she had started, and we wondered if we could scale what we were doing in that homeschool co-op, and we could. And what that looks like is Innovations Academy, our school that we started back in 2008. We're a K-8 charter school. Now, a charter school is a public school where public students can come. Anybody can come to a charter school. There's no admission. There's no fee. However, it's operated much more like a private school. We can pick our own teachers. We can pick our own curriculum. There's a lot more flexibility. We've been open for 10 years. We serve students K-8, and we serve 400 students every single year. Our mission at our school, at Innovations Academy, we powerfully create our lives through self-expression, compassionate connection, and purposeful learning. Our students learn in a non-coercive environment focused on inquiry-based, project-based learning, and a very strong social-emotional curriculum. 10 years ago when we started our school, people weren't talking about social-emotional curriculums. It was really novel at the time, and I'm so glad to see that it has expanded to the masses at this point. So then, in 2010, I ended up joining the founding team of the Thiel Fellowship, which was started by Peter Thiel, who is a founder of PayPal and first investor in Facebook. Our motto at the Thiel Foundation and the Thiel Fellowship specifically was that some ideas just can't wait. It was very controversial. We were picking 20 young people under 20 years old and giving them $100,000 to work on a project of their choosing. However, there was one condition, and a big one. They needed to forego college to join our program. So the whole idea was thinking, could we give people the same amount of funding that they might spend on their education to see what they would do with that time and those resources and mentorship that we would give them as well? We made international headlines, and people haven't stopped talking about the education bubble ever since. So our mission at the Thiel Fellowship, we're a community of visionaries creating a radical rethinking of what it takes to succeed and improve the world through self-directed learning, independent thought, and meaningful contributions. It was through creating a robust community of makers that we decided that we would scale our efforts even further. And we saw some great outcomes happening with people like Ritesh, people like Vitalik, people like Stacy, who you saw up here earlier today. That my colleague and I, who worked at the Thiel Foundation with the Thiel Fellowship, decided to start our own venture fund. So we wanted the opportunity to work with more young people. As generous as the Thiel Foundation is, they pick 20 people per year to work with. We thought we could work with a lot more if we started our own organization. So we started our venture fund that is dedicated to working with high school students, college students, and those who have dropped out. And we're called 15-17, not because we do work with people who are sometimes between the ages of 15 and 17 and older, but because that's a year. That's a historic year when Martin Luther went to the church and nailed his theses to the door saying, you know, this is absolute craziness that the church is selling a piece of paper called an indulgence to get into the kingdom of heaven. He very much believed that you should be able to have your own relationship with God without having to pay for it. So the parallel here is that we say that in today's age, there's another large institution selling a very expensive piece of paper saying you are not an educated person unless you have that, and that's a diploma. And we think it was wrong then, and it's wrong now. So this is our team. There's just 4 of us. We're actually quite small, and we'll talk about how we scale our efforts a little bit later. But we're a 20 million venture fund in San Francisco. We work with 30 investors. We offer young people's companies $250,000 to get their companies off the ground. And we also offer a non-dilutive grant of $1,000 to young people who want to get a project started. We really love to back people who have conviction and go against the grain. And because that really embodies who we are as well. Nobody would have said a teacher like myself would have become a VC. So These are some of the people that we work with. We've built a much larger community. This is how we scale some of what we do, is by having an inclusive group of young people that we work with, not just on their companies, but as community builders. Because young people have said to us time and time again, I want to meet my tribe. I want to meet other young people like me, and we provide that opportunity to them. So most of these people don't have college degrees and also think that you don't need one. They think the education system is incredibly antiquated. So those young people have shifted how they think about learning and education. I like to say that our mindset about school changes when we decouple it from learning. So school and learning, they're not the same thing. Two separate ideas here. So millennials and Gen Z in particular are rethinking what it means to be educated. And with this mindset, students are leapfrogging college to start careers and companies. So earlier, we were talking about Harvard. This is the oldest US institution of higher education, started in 1636. Because they're so old and so prestigious, I think they have a responsibility to innovate and do radical, radical things. However, they don't. I wish the goal was to educate the masses, but it's not. It's to educate a select few. So this means that Harvard is more like one of these, a luxury good. So the more people that have this, the less it's worth. And students have come to realize that maintaining status has become more important than educating students across the globe. Additionally, students are experiencing inexcusable debt. In 2020, it's estimated that the student debt market will be at $2 trillion. And the average student right now actually has about $30,000 in debt when they come out of school. And in the US, you can't file a bankruptcy on this. This is with you for life. What school was once a vehicle that was supposed to lift people out of poverty, but now it's something that's keeping them there. And I just think this is completely wrong. Additionally, young people have so much vision. They want to change the world. They want to do things now. They don't want to be told you have to wait until you finish school, until you have your first job. The concept of paying your dues is an old concept at this point. They want to move forward. Students also have more opportunity than ever before. I've met young people who will have an internship somewhere, and that internship will turn into a potential hire, and they haven't even finished college yet, and they have to figure out, do I take a salary now? Do I wait till later? Do I start a company? There are many, many more options than when many of us went to college. So just some examples of this. This is Austin Russell. He's both a Thiel Fellow and a portfolio company founder of ours. When I met him, he was a 17-year-old gangly teenager. He was a physics and a photonics geek. And to be honest, we didn't know if he was crazy or crazy awesome, because he had all these wild ideas about things, and we didn't even know if he could do them. He used his Thiel Fellowship time to do his research and development work, and he ended up developing a LiDAR system. This is the system that goes in some autonomous driving sensors so that it can distinguish between things like, how do you know that's a puddle instead of a hole? A camera can't do that. So today, Austin's company, Luminar Technologies, has grown to 400 people. They have offices in Orlando and San Francisco and public partnerships with Toyota and Volvo. Thank you. You all met Stacy earlier. She's absolutely extraordinary. She said earlier that, she had wanted to meet Richard Branson because she wanted to emulate him and become like him. I think someday we're going to see Richard Branson standing here saying, I want to be like Stacy. So I'm looking forward to that. So students are thinking differently about college globally. So in South Africa alone, there's a 50% college dropout rate. Students are enrolling, or of those who enroll, 50% are not even making it through and accruing that debt in the meantime. In 2015, there was a protest, Fees Must Fall, where 5,000 students marched on Parliament to protest a tuition hike at a university of 10% that year. The government mandated that there would be no increases in fees in 2016, but students today know that there are other options. There's online learning, there's micro degrees. And there's some wonderful things happening here as well. This is a company called Umuzi. Their founder is trying to work on equality here in Johannesburg. They teach on-demand coding skills, design, and data science. And they're free for students. And they've come up with innovative models to do this. And so they partner with businesses who want to hire students, and those businesses fund the education of the students. Since 2014, they've educated 400 students, and 80% of their grads are gainfully employed in technology companies. Earlier this conference, we heard about African Leadership Academy and all the wonderful, amazing work they're doing. But one other thing they're doing is also hosting events outside of the university work that they do, and they had a Youth and Blockchain Summit. What I love about things like these is you can go to a hackathon, you can go to a summit, you can go to a workshop, and you don't need to be an industry leader. You don't have to know how to program to go. Oftentimes, these things will teach you on site, and oftentimes, these types of programs are free. Outside of Johannesburg, there's a place called the Makerspace. These are classes for makers and inventors, and they also do community building. I remembered if you went to like a tech or vocational class, I took a wood shop class when I was in middle school. That was like a dorky thing to do. It wasn't cool. There wasn't a community to build up where you could go and make things with other people. And that's really changing. So now, instead of working in isolation, people are working together. So we also have some innovative programs that are starting. This is Lambda School. They invest in students directly. They have a 30-week immersive program in software development, design, and data science. Classes are completely free, and students only pay if they obtain a high-paying job. So that is the only time they pay. And there's also a cap on how much they pay, which is $30,000, that they pay as a portion of their income after they get that opportunity with a company. The outcomes have been pretty wonderful. This is a tweet from the founder. I love this quote on the side here. I had to borrow money to get to my job because I couldn't even afford gas until my first payday. In the span of 6 months, Lambda took me from literally poverty to a job in 6 figures. So this type of learning and this type of way of bringing incentives together between education, companies, and students, I think is part of where the future is going. This is a school that's opened up in India called Pesto. They have a very similar model, and they are teaching students there how to be good remote skill workers. And of course, we heard all about African Leadership Academy yesterday and their fabulous program. So we see that South Africa has the opportunity to future-proof itself by taking leaps and bounds in education. And I think in some ways you already are. There's a lot of good happening, and there's a lot of problems that need to be changed, but I want to focus on some of the positive schools that I've been able to find here. There's a whole group of schools called collaboration schools. It's very much like the charter school movement in the United States. They're public schools, but they're independently operated. So these types of schools are meant for students who are in lower income communities, and they're getting the same access to a high quality education. This school, for which there are 16 of them, is called the Spark School. What they're doing is they're doing an affordable private school model. So their goal is to work with approximately the same amount of funding that the public school uses per student and see if they can educate, but at a higher level. And their students are excelling. They are testing a whole grade level above and meeting and exceeding expectations. So I listened to a talk of one of the school directors, and she said, part of their goal is to propel students into globally engaged citizens as adults. Spark stands for service, persistence, achievement, responsibility, and kindness. So they're taking that social emotional curriculum and embedding it deeply into everything they do. And in 2019, they're opening a high school. So this made me start thinking, well, they're opening a high school in 2019. Well, what if their goal for their high school was not that every single student went to college? How could that change things? You know, in K-12, we're responsible for thinking about the future and where our students are going, and that's a really tough job. Can you imagine teaching kindergartners and trying to think about where they're going to be over a decade later? It's very difficult, but it is our responsibility. And if college isn't the future, we need to be preparing them for something else. So in the US, we're seeing a decrease in enrollment in college. A lot of people are likening this to the cost of college and economic hardship. But I think students are catching on to the false promises that are being made and choosing something different. We pay a lot of lip service to lifelong learning, but we focus on short-term results. And we've talked about leapfrogging a lot. But I see what's really going on here in this room. Look at what African Leadership Academy is doing. That's not a child's game. That's not leapfrog. That's a brave and a bold chasm jump. And I see everybody in here as interested in chasm jumping old antiquated systems. So the South African education system has the opportunity to transcend what has previously been thought possible. So here's an idea. They're not actively doing this yet, but what if Amuzi and Spark collaborated together and made something where high school students, you know, were getting the gen eds they needed, but maybe in the last 2 years they're learning all the skills they need through a program that is keeping track of what are the jobs that are in demand, what is really needed in the workforce right now. One thing I really loved about, actually I'm going to be touring Amuzi and Spark later this week, but one thing that I love is that they know about each other. So they're already talking and collaborating. I was in Mexico for another summit, and a lot of the educators there weren't talking to each other. So something you all have is collaboration, and keep going with that. So imagine if the goal for those students was something different. What if it looked like the Spark vision to propel students into globally engaged citizens as adults by furthering their education through meaningful work and accelerating their learning regularly? This would look different. We wouldn't just focus on, oh, did you go to college? We might focus on, like, over the long-term adulthood of someone's life, how often were they going to conferences? How often were they going to boot camps? Were they going to hackathons? Maybe they went to college too, but it wouldn't be the only outcome we'd be looking at. And we could start looking at other questions, like, are students procuring jobs in fields in highest demand? How many students are doing better than their parents? How many students are creating jobs, like Ritesh? How often are students enrolling in boot camps, conferences, and other learning opportunities? I'm also really curious to look at things like, what do you notice students doing when no one's paying attention, when it's not for school credit? So Ramesh mentioned yesterday bottoms-up thinking. And as I was building this talk, I was really inspired because for a very long time, I've thought about changes in higher education as actually being top-down. And so I've been thinking a lot about, like, I was at the Prague Summit just back in February, and I was thinking about, I think the answer is that hiring institutions need to change what they're doing and do better at assessing students. That will funnel down into college not being as necessary, which funnels all the way down into K through 12. However, when I was looking into the system here, I thought about it really, really differently. You all have the opportunity to greatly change how the whole world thinks about educating young people from the bottom up. K through 12 schools could start expanding on their mission and vision, thinking about what's going to be happening for the future of the students here and around the world. I'm just really inspired by this. And I'm really grateful to have been invited to speak here. I am a learner. I learn by doing and very much sort of on the fly and by something being relevant. And so being invited to speak here, I got to learn a lot more about the systems that are happening here in Johannesburg and South Africa. And I'd love for you to stay in touch. So please reach out to me anytime. It's email address and all that good stuff. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.